All right, so it's live. Here's the thing. I'm just going to leave it live. I'm going to put a link to it if I can figure out how to do that. This is events page, I think. What happens when I go to that page? I have no idea how to put the, oh, how about up here? That's right. This link. Okay. But I'm not necessarily going to talk about anything unless we show up. Right. Oh, now it's me a few minutes ago. Is this just a little experiment? Someone commented on the fact that I told people I was a direct descendant of John Brown, which I'm pretty proud of, if I was proud of that kind of thing, which I guess I am a little in that case. It's asking me if I want to watch this video on natalism or physics. Oh, now I gotta close this delay here. Okay. All right, well, whatever. So it's supposed to be on natalism or physics or something. All right. I love this back here with the Native Instruments machine. That's fun. Let's see what I'm talking about. I don't think you'll be able to hear it if I play with this headphone. Okay, we'll see. Let's see. Probably see why I love that thing. Okay. Plus it lights up in many colors. I was also noticing Thunderfoot went after Hannibal, Hannibal the Victor, is it now? Hannibal the Barbera. But what was Hannibal going on about that he was going to punch Thunderfoot in the face? What the fuck were you thinking? Nuts or something? So I'm watching a data process here. It's on, I'm running the whole growing season. This is on 0625. Over here, I just ran spot condition. So let's see. So on the antinatalism thing, Hythloday showed some videos of Gary talking about the only thing that gives value is consciousness, right? And oh, that didn't work. Wait a second. I need to put log in front. And the thing is, okay, so consciousness is the only thing that gives value. It's the only thing of value. Someone's here. The truth. The truth quest. Danny. And now I don't remember what I was talking about. I got this log file to look at. Looks pretty good. Anyway, he had in Mendham talking about how you know, humans, well, no, not humans, consciousness is the only thing that gives value to the universe. But his plan is to get rid of all of that. But, you know, even with the idea that really what he's saying then is that, well, the only thing that gives value is consciousness, and that's a negative value. Well, it's still true that if having consciousness has value, even this kind of value that's only positive in the non-negative direction, like he likes to say, that since we have people that exist currently, that it is more positive, a better value calculation to go ahead and alleviate suffering than it is to try to eradicate the potential for suffering. QED. I mean, this truth request, oh, you have commented. I don't know. They just do that. Well, truth quest, I was just going to keep looking at my programming and tests over here, unless there's a topic. So since you're here, it's your job to, it can be, it has to be strictly natalism or physics or something else. You can't go out of that category limitation. Slog is like 4,000 lines long. Well, that's pretty good. A funny thing about Gary is, you know, that I pointed out to Gary when I talked to him. I talked to him last Saturday, and I don't go in there that often. Sometimes I go and it's not happening, so I don't know about that. you got to give Gary credit for carrying the whole thing. But anyway, he loved, one reason Gary is able to carry the conversation and make it happen, even though he's also losing his cool, which is a detriment to it, but it happens nevertheless. It's just because he looks for these differences. He immediately wants to make a difference out of it in a combat, and people like that. They can be entertained, at least mildly and sustainably that way, right? So because Gary wants to argue with, like, a main thing to me is this idea I'm working on, phantasmagoricalism, as well as bridging to that from my basic philosophy using this illusions exists model. And but anyway, so Gary identifies this difference between us in that I think that there's consciousness at the cellular level. I think, things like fungus, which is a relatively modern, fungus is like the not so missing link between animals and plants. It's much more, it's more like us than like plants. It's it's one of the recent solutions overall to ways to survive. And so I think that there's a little will in the cells of things, in a fungus, which is sort of it's definitely a multicellular body like a plant. It's but it's also closer to this ancestor that's something like a paramecium, right? So he loves to disagree with that and mock that and stuff, or joke around, which I think is fine. I think it's pretty fair. I mean, our latest conversations, for example, have been pretty fair on that. I also make jokes about his views. But what's really funny is that he has consented and believes that insects have this kind of awareness. So if microbes have it too or not, I mean, he and I are already on the side of it goes down pretty far. And I remember when I first was talking to Gary years ago that he was like on the fence about insects. So we identify these differences, but in reality, I mean, the real issue is we're coming from a history where people didn't even admit other humans had feelings. And people said that animals don't really feel pain, even though you can see they're reacting in pain. And that's all we ever knew about the behavior of pain, is what we could see, really. I mean, we know our own feelings of pain, but the idea that other people can have pain is that we see that, and it's natural, and it's natural for all mammals. And it's even somewhat natural and shared for all creatures. You can see an insect writhing in pain, even though we know they don't have the same kind of pain impulses as we do. There's an agony there. And obviously you don't want to make the mistake of thinking, hey, I feel things the same way an insect does, and therefore the pain is the same. No, but there's some sort of an agony system, pain or stress or an alert. Even with a plant, when a plant gets distressed, there's a sort of a sad and depressed look to it. It looks like it can take a lot of abuse, but when it is abused, it looks depressed. I'm not saying it feels depressed. I'm saying these things are all analogs of one another. There's a reason this stuff capitulates itself throughout the kingdom of life, is what I'm saying. So, for example, a solid example would be, a paramecium going around and finding a sugar source. It's going to have an emotion that's like, yum and yay, this is awesome. That I don't see any reason that a single-celled life form can't have an emotion like, yeah. So, what's TruthQuest saying here? Yeah, well, the thing, yes, exactly. I mean, the thing is, Truth Quest is talking about various things. I don't want to reread them, but I'll just go on to the topic you're bringing up, which is, plants feeling pain. Well, okay, like with the insect, it's unlikely that it's like us, and we could even make some value judgments and say it's probably not as vivid or as terrible. I mean, plants have no reason to have this immediate reaction, but it's enough to stimulate the plant to, maybe have some kinds of reaction, healing reactions. And the reason we can assume that is because there is at least the information that there is damage, because plants have basically the correlates of neurons, and they even use the same kind of chemicals, action potential networks, that, regular animals, with, neurons also have. So they communicate at a high speed, just like our neurons, where high speed is just like, 50, 100 miles an hour or whatever. Our neuron, nerve cell speed is not very high. And but it's on that same scale with the plants. So they just don't move. They don't have the muscle system to move rapidly, because that's not their solution to life. So, yeah. I'm not a vegetarian, but I acknowledge like the ethical superiority of it. And I have been in the past. I'm a somewhat conscientious meat eater, and I care about how the animal was treated, or if it was in the wild, or if it had a decent situation. But I don't necessarily always follow those principles either. But but I think that human race has to become vegetarian, and I would do it again. And we always are bringing more and more um, vegetarian and vegan kind of stuff into our diet. But I don't know that I ever will be fully vegetarian. I mean, the main thing to me is this industry farming. So there's certain things like, if they collect, if you sustainably collect a crab from the ocean, I don't know whether it's right or wrong. It's hard to stop eating that. Right. Don't eat tuna. Yeah, well, all of the sea fish, it's funny how much they're all getting mercury in them just from the general issue. And Fukushima, Jesus Christ, what's going on there? Because, I don't really understand it. If the news organizations, well, I do understand. The news organizations, if they weren't owned by other corporations, they would just talk about something like Fukushima for years. It's like, you know what? We can hire a Fukushima correspondent. If the science column ever doesn't have anything to talk about, they could talk about Fukushima for decades, because it's just piling up, the waste and the issue and the radioactive water and everything else, or it's going out into the ocean where it's piling up there, and yet they don't really want to talk about it. Why would that be? Well, because it's not just a press organization, it's not a TV station or a newspaper on its own that makes money. It's a available owned property as a loss leader for these corporations that actually own the media and influence all the media through buying all the advertisement and being its basic income source. So yeah, that's crazy. I've been following that. You can get information about it, but on the other hand, I saw this guy because I was looking into funguses recently, because it's an interesting life form. But this guy, there's a mushroom they have that collects cesium, and it's like 10,000 times more cesium concentration than it'd be in the surrounding soil. So they're planting these things all around Fukushima in order to slowly draw the radiation out of the soil. And it's pretty good, because there's forms of fungus that can dissolve all materials, basically. Rock, anything that ever was living, certainly is living. And as badass as fungus is, and as gross as people think of it as, it's also really mild. I mean, you only really die of fungus. People of AIDS used to die from fungal infections and fungal pneumonia and stuff. But pretty much, I mean, fungus is like lichen. It's not really going to kill the tree. It's just like hanging out. And there's plenty of symbiotic examples. This guy that is into fungus that did the experiment with the radiation collection from soil, he you know, he's really into it in general. He's also done it with oil, and you know, he thinks we can save, you know, a lot of our problems could be solved with you know, by finding the right you know, fungal agent to, and that basically when times have gotten tough, ice ages, maybe a, you know, a meteor, any of that stuff, that the fungus is really resilient, and basically the mammals and plants that survive are those that are symbiotic with the fungus in some level. But I don't know, because it's interesting just because of how badass fungus is, and yet most fungal type problems that people have, they're minor, you know, compared to what bacteria and virus get up to. So yeah, I don't know what else. I'm about to spin out. That's about it. Either somebody comes on cam in the next few minutes, or that's it. So I had stuff I was doing over here too. So now I'm distracted. Well, thanks, Truth Quest, for at least coming in and asking some questions and saying some opinions. I guess I didn't repeat the stuff about going to vegetarian that you said, but I did talk about it. I believe vegetarianism is. Truth Quest also agreed. He's like, oh, yeah, it's better, but I go crazy after 5 days. All right, well, that's cool. I'm glad, and because too, if you know, it works out in the sense that I just thought, well, I'll try to do a room. You know, if somebody shows up and it converses and text counts, then, you know, it makes it worthwhile. It's like a critical mass of having this kind of open conversation. That picture's Nietzsche, right? I'm trying to remember if it's Nietzsche or real young, or it was someone else. I'm like, wait, is it Orwell? Oh, Tesla. Oh, okay. I knew I was wrong, but I didn't really think I was wrong. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I knew I recognized it. Someone cool. Yeah, Tesla's a really cool figure. Oh, that's right. I just did test it and it worked. Well, let me see how this weather collection stuff is going. I've refactored some company's technology that they had last year that wasn't really usable because it wasn't scalable, didn't work on the cloud and whatnot. People had to run it from their own machine. And we've reworked it into this thing that they called the recipe model, that is from the software I was working on at my last employer that's been open sourced. And so now I've been doing that a few months, and I'm reprocessing data. It's satellite data, infrared, red, and green, but we don't really use the green. And, you know, taken of the Earth, obviously, for the purpose of precision agriculture. And right now it is publishing little fields, little areas of clients, people that want this data, to a database for 0726. I have a script that I've told to process all these fields for, I think, that completes the whole growing season, the whole year. Now I forget. Anyway, it's July 26th at the moment. So does it tell me how long it's been up? Because I'm just going to leave this up as a video. I don't give a damn. Half of it was just whatever. But it doesn't say how long it's been recording. Hmm. Oh, how long does it say on what YouTube then? I have it open on YouTube except for that. Stop it from playing. Ooh, 24 minutes, yeah, with about 3 minutes of content. Wahaha. Well, I have a good another 10 minutes before it gets really tedious by my personal understanding of YouTube standards. So what else? Yeah, natalism. Yeah, if life gives a value, and on the other hand, I don't know. That's another one that's just, it's a good topic. I mean, I don't think I've really been up to the task of defending life, because for a lot of the years of the anti-natalism argument, I'm basically like, well, yeah, tell people not to reproduce, and who knows, but it's a personal decision, you know. But yeah, there's reasons to slow population. Now, population's already slowed in my lifetime, and it's sort of like, well, yeah, you know, we need to say why it's worthwhile to live. I mean, it is difficult, but my basic theory is that, okay, it's just as bad as everybody says. I'm one of the people that talks that stuff and describes the problem, but it's mostly because of choices we make as humans. And also, I think there's a minority sentiment that runs the culture. And it's not just like productive people that are the go-getters and this is how they think we should live our life at war and all this bullshit and spying on everybody. You know, it's a subset that, you know, it's not, that has risen to this top, so-called, you know, not because of what we as a majority, a massive majority of people would consider, you know, the merit of organizing a civilization and running its big picture infrastructures. It's just, you know, who knows what, but I mean, I think it's a certain kind of, basically the success of, you know, centuries old organized criminal activities, only some of which have ever been made, you know, identified as criminal and theoretically prohibited. And so it's this minority, and people could do a lot better. You know, I don't think people want perpetual war. Even the people that want war in the United States, um, uh, I know I need to announce ahead of time. Yeah, well, I haven't got to that point. What I'd really like to do is do one of these regularly, but I can't possibly commit to a particular time. But maybe my compromise should be like deciding a couple hours in advance. But it was literally like, oh, I think I'm about to get this done. I'll do it and wait for it. So yeah, I know, every time. So yeah, I lost my train of thought again. So this is all working. That's good. And that's done. Oh, so I only did it from 0501 to 0801. I have this great program that'll go get data and then process it with this recipe system, which is open source, as I said. So let's do 0801 to 1101. Because now I forget. Oh, I see. I don't need to do that. Yeah, that's right. That was the second half. So, okay, did that guy for a whole year. Awesome. Forgot what was going on there. So anyway, so yeah, it's a chance to celebrate life. I mean, I just disagree with so many parts of the antinatalism argument. I mean, their assessment of risk. This idea, I wish an antinatalist would address the issue of, you know, if it's unacceptable to ever take a risk with someone else's safety or whatever, then what about if you get into a car and drive a car? Do you not admit you're taking other people's safety that you don't know, just like your grandchildren that evidently you're held responsible for bringing into the world? Well, you know, people that you might run into, You might delay somebody and then they get in an accident. If you're just responsible for whatever happens to someone after you've influenced the chain of events in their life, then we're all sort of super responsible for each other. And the idea that these are a risk is obvious. Of course they are, but the idea that you couldn't take this risk seems a little bit ludicrous. So, I don't see how there's any justification for living at all with this standard of risk that the antinatalists have placed on this situation. My understanding of Gary's situation is that Gary likes nature and was a little bit, at some level, a hippy-dippy about things could be beautiful and look at the interesting bugs, and could have just enjoy all of that in the world in a more or less straightforward state, except for that he found how futile it is to fight for it and how bad the situation is. And so, rather than find solace in continuing the fight, which he was still in the fight when I started watching him on YouTube, he's receded into this logical solution where the only fight is to stop everything, and therefore you don't have to feel like you're having a perpetual failure in, valuable things like getting IRV running, or trying to, fix things in your own county or your borough or whatever. Well, I think that the question of ending one's own life is something that every philosopher should consider seriously, and it's a dangerous question. And I don't think there's a general solution, but generally when people do think that it's worth ending their own life, it's just an emotional overreaction. If they go ahead and do it anyway, you can't say they made a mistake, though, because the ultimate meaning of things is personally given. So the meaning of one's own personal life, well, if they take it, then there is nobody left to judge whether they made the right or wrong decision. But it's my personal belief that if you could have that person still around to judge the situation after ending their own life, that often they would decide, no, I was just going through a moment or a long moment for a year or two. I also think that the situation we're in is like, a captivity situation where, animals don't like to live in that situation. So it's natural that you would have, this expressed in a certain number of people, whatever the taboos or other mitigating inhibitions that there were. I think if people had the ability to do productive things for a reasonable amount of their time, let's say 20, 30 hours a week, and could at that point live a reasonably secure life, meaning they could have, their recreation and stuff that they basically want for big ticket items that don't hit everybody, like health stuff. You had a system to help people, that most people would be satisfied with a mix of doing some productive work, whether or not it was their favorite thing, and recreation and free time and art and enjoyment and friends and all this kind of stuff that people like. And that you just see a lot less need, a lot less likelihood, a much more individual case-by-case situation that people would find life as a whole unsatisfactory. And instead, when people find life unsatisfactory in this kind of condition that isn't so oppressive, they change their situation. They want to move or something. They want to do something different, go back to school. And if people could go back to school when they wanted to, then I think you'd have less problems. Some people want to go to school forever because that's all they really like. It's not a big loss. Most people wouldn't be like that. They're trying to find their thing. Well, in terms of awakening people, Yeah, when I was younger, I wanted to do something like that, and then I realized, well, what really proves a philosophy, and am I trying to promote my own ideas? Are they proven? I should work on, I should think, I should do all this kind of stuff. And in a sense, I ended up thinking it was a waste of my time, but not really. I just think that the basic thing is the change of the self, and to try to find a situation where you can help yourself and the environment around you, where you can do something positive, for yourself. Enlightened self-interest is the goal, if that's possible. And I think it is. I think our society makes it harder than it has to be. Um, as far as the morons around the world, you're so right, except for here's the thing. Okay, a couple things. This is interesting because I've been through these emotions you're describing about the nausea at the world and if it's run by morons. Yeah. Yeah, healthcare is a major one as far as that goes, or in my case, I'm trying to start a business or at least, work contract for programming and stuff. And, I wanted to do that in the past and I couldn't because I couldn't get on healthcare plans. At least now I have to pay, but at least I can get on. It makes a huge difference, especially um, uh, important would be if it was just a normal thing, I think. But so there's a couple of interesting things I think about this because I have similar feelings, but I've dealt with them a particular way, and I'm not saying it's the right way, but it relates. So one was Nietzsche talks about being nauseous at all the morons basically that are running things, and but he points out that if you're nauseous, if there's a poison and it makes you nauseous, then that's the poison being stronger than you. So to a certain degree, it's up to us if we want to do anything about it to get the Constitution to be able to take the situation without reacting nauseous. Just get a better, stronger stomach kind of thing. It's kind of a cheap out, but I think it's kind of an interesting point. It sort of freed me to look at the situation a little bit differently. And for example, I mean, 6 million years ago, okay, the life's been around billions of years, 3.5 billion years or something, and only 6 million years ago, we're freaking chimpanzees. We're like chimpanzees. So, you can only expect so much. So in a way, there's reason to, at the slow glacial pace of the rights of trying to stop slavery. We haven't even stopped it, but at least trying to say we would stop it, and various human rights. I mean, it seems glacial and slow, but if you're looking at the 200,000 time scale that we've been more or less human, they say, or the 6 million since we were more or less chimp-like, maybe we're not really that far away from that stuff working out. Now, you still have an issue of, well, okay, yeah, we're really close, meaning in 250 years, I'd like this place okay, and we're not there yet. So it is a personal decision, but I don't know. I have certain things that make it worth going on that if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't. I'm not in a huge I'm not the best person to talk about like there being a universal reason to go on. I mean, I'd like to go on and try to do things. I'd like to keep trying at some enlightened self-interest where I do well and it helps the people around me too. Yeah, it's not. I think this is a threshold I'm at. I would love to see more people. I agree with you that, it's pathetic. I'm just going to quote uh, uh, the Truth Quest now. That it's pathetic we're still talking about shit that's not that difficult to solve. I totally agree that. And I was doing some math recently. Like, if you took the world's rice production and you divide it by all the people in the world, every single individual gets like 136 pounds of rice. Okay, that's sustainable right there. That's without the wheat and the fruit and everything else, right? So, the idea that there isn't enough and in population going out of control, well, maybe there are too many people for certain lifestyles or something. I don't tend to think that's going to be a huge problem. we're supposed to balance off around 11 billion. Yeah, maybe some people would say the lifestyle that results isn't good, but basically it's not like we're going to run out of fucking rice. So, or wheat or the other ones that are really huge, just these single giant commodities and corn and stuff, you'd be surprised how much there is per person. Corn, you can't even count that because so much of that is just for livestock. But the point is there is enough resources on this planet for everybody. And you want to stop crime, you want to stop people having too many kids, you want to stop any of these things. It's not that difficult. We know they've tried it, and some of the things we weren't sure about 25 years ago, we figured out, because guess what? We tried them out in Africa, and now Africa has 2.5 children per woman or something, and instead of 7. We could dig wells in Africa and they would not get sick from the water, and we wouldn't have problems like Ebola and whatever else. Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about communism is, okay, Marx, according to my understanding, basically is, I think the Marxist theory was violated by them having the internationals and the Fourth International and advocating the revolutions and the skipping. Go straight from a monarchy, from the czar, to a communist state. That's actually against Marxist theories. I think Marx, the practitioner, is a bit reprehensible for the way he pushed his ideas, but some of the theories about how you can calculate labor and stuff are just like, oh, it's actually straightforward if you look at it that way. Of course that makes sense. Where's the value come from and all of this kind of stuff? So in that light, he said that capitalism naturally grows into this solution. So you don't have communism as we understand it, revolutionary communism. What you have is sort of the capitalism grows up, and people's private empires become institutions, and then the institution becomes fixed in place. Its creator long since gone, or a generation or two or whatever it would be gone. That's the vague part. And then it's in place, and people can kind of take it over. Now, at that point, maybe it's revolutionary, but not really. In the Marxist theoretical Marxism, it's supposed to be a soft revolution, because basically by the time the workers seize that infrastructure, everybody thinks of it as infrastructure already, and they're just taking over running it, because at that point there will be no capitalists to run it, because it's existed so long. It's not it's not an entrepreneurial venture, it's an establishment. And you kind of can see that happen in some cases, right? In where did we get the mail, the hybrid between Pony Express and government. You see some of the government taking over things, but in the Marxist thing, there's this, it actually happens. And I'm not saying I think that's true, but I think that's a pretty decent picture. And as far as when you're saying, well, how would it come about? In the more details, I really think, and I would like to take part in this, and this is a dream of mine, but we'll see. But I think we need companies that run themselves like co-ops. There's a great Spanish company called Mondragon. It's a huge, like $13 billion company or something. They run themselves as a cooperative, and they elect their board of directors, and it includes people that went up through the system as engineers or administrative assistants or whatever. And and they make technological goods, like kind of generic brand fridges, but whatever. They have hundreds of companies in a cooperative. You have a company like that, and it competes directly with the capitalist companies, or for example, another example is the credit unions or the giant corporate-like non-for-profits like AAA. I mean, if companies like that can take over the space, we'd be a lot better off with credit unions. They have a lot of the same problems that banks have, corruption-wise. They're prone to similar kinds of temptations, but just the basic fact that of how they're structured, it makes them a lot better than banks. There's no disagreeing with them. You might be just as pissed when you go down and they won't give you a loan, but overall, with the shenanigans banks are pulling, credit unions are great. So these not-for-profit, co-op organized things, as we get the more and more sophisticated and more of them, Kaiser, these are not perfect companies, but the way they're set up, they'll live or die in a market of their merit, of their ability to satisfy, in the case of credit unions, probably the most successful, to satisfy your need to have a safe place to put your money and get a local loan and a decent rate and free checks or whatever. So, though, using credit unions for years, I now see why actually banks are not so bad. Some of the banks, like we have a TD Banks here, and they offer certain things. It's like, well, those services are different from what you get from a credit union. But great, you do distinguish yourself with those services as maybe I should have an account there, maybe I should have both. And a hybrid economy is fine because we actually want this so that our, kind of our public-oriented, not-for-profit oriented, pseudo-private, not-for-profit kind of organizations that they're private in the sense that they're owned or run by their members and or employees. We want those kinds of organizations to compete with the Walmarts and whatever else and survive sort of on their merits, with the caveat that, yeah, I'm a liberal and I think that, I believe in things like an international minimum wage and stuff that would make it a little bit harder to win by, going to Bangladesh. And so I mean, there would be certain rules that make it more even for these other groups. But even in the meanwhile, well, forget that. I think that there's certain industries. I mean, in my industry, programming, there's no reason that programmers shouldn't join together in more of a union and a cooperative of shared and combined labor than this. This salaried employee or non-salaried employee thing it's so obviously wage slavery. It's not just rhetoric. That is a fucked up way to run things. You can't work for anybody else, and you can't, and this and that and the other thing. It's just, and plus companies just expect you to move wherever they're going to be if they want to move. It's like a decision they make, and then they tell their employees, yeah, we might lose some, but they more or less are expecting you to follow along in this total violation of any individuality. I mean, granted, if a company might move, well, it should just be more like, an organization that wants to move. And, if 30% of the people don't and 70 do, the company probably moves and 30% of the people don't go along. That's different than just people in a freaking room deciding whether you move and don't care about your kids or what percentage of this or that. And then legally, if you're a publicly traded company, they have to go for the profit. They can't even say, well, we did this because this was the right thing to do, or it was going to help us in the long run, or even it was going to help our profits in the long run, but hurt them in 5 years. They could get sued by their freaking shareholders for being decent people. That kind of stuff is not okay. Oh, I didn't hear the Saudi king died today. I've been working and I didn't really scan any news. Interesting. Yeah, well, I don't think it's much of a secret now, but I don't go on about it. I worked in astronomy when I was in Hawaii, so I got that. I did not work for that. That's Chandra back there. So Chandra is an X-ray satellite, one of the great telescopes, so to speak. As NASA's got all the other Hubbles that do other wavelengths. That one's X-ray. Man, X-ray's the best. On my YouTube, that's an X-ray sun. I've been using that for years. X-ray is a great way. I mean, most of the sky is so dark in X-ray, but when you find things, there's something going on. Infrared's good too because you got all these clouds, but when you find something, nebulous in an X-ray, then it's like it's an explosion or something. Usually pretty spectacular shapes, like a firework. So yeah, those are a lot of galaxies. You must be talking about that one, right? I have 2 copies of it. So there's some up here. Oh, you can't see. I have another copy of the same thing and some galaxies in optical and infrared. And that one, those are galaxies, and mostly they're really active. So there's some planet-forming regions in there, and then I think probably some colliding. So a lot of the spherical ones at the bottom are actually, they're just stellar scale of a like supernova, I think. But Chandras are great. They're all great. So I always forget. One of them went up. I worked on one that was called certif, and it got named something else. When I was a student, I worked at NASA Ames, and I worked building some electronics to test some detectors for, it was called certif during its Spitzer. Yeah, the Spitzer Space Telescope. It became, and it is an infrared, one of the great observatories. So I like that, was fun. No, I didn't see that. Yeah, cool. That sounds good. I'll have to look that up. 4 terabytes. Wow. Stuff I'm working in now is just that there is this plethora of data. 4 terabytes. Well, I was working in astronomy. They are not caught up. Like all of the data that's in this virtual observatory stuff now, so that just anybody can get it, means you can do mathematical astronomy as a amateur now if you really want to, because people are interested in a few stars and they take this whole field. So there is like 99.999% of the data in those fields, even assuming that what the scientist was looking for at the day was the most interesting thing in there, which is not really a safe assumption in the long run. There's all this data that's outside it and that you can get access to with the virtual observatory. But what I'm working on is more commercial applications of this kind of thing. Some commercial satellite data that's getting number crunched. I'd be interested in doing business data analysis. I mean, your average, small restaurant hasn't as much data as banks used to have, really, and they're not doing anything with it. I do all kinds of coding because what's Kepler 22b? Is that from the Kepler mission or something? I do get to do a lot of stuff. I learned to program and got a philosophy degree, so I had this freedom of pursuing it, and programming allows you to get a lot of different domains, and so I worked in science and games, and now I'm doing data science and commercial, and so, that's one part of my life that I managed to, keep interesting. I know about the Kepler mission, but is Kepler 22b from, because I might have heard of it, because I've been following Kepler since it was up. It was too bad it broke, but still, what an amazing mission. I've been watching it now since it went up. Right. Oh, right, because it's the sweet zone. Yeah, no. Well, what I think about Kepler in the fall, they have a follow-up coming up, is that it actually means in our lifetime we might find life, because the next step is once they find these guys, they have figured out. Okay, and I was in astronomy while they've been trying to do this, so I actually know what they're trying to do and work with some of the people that are working on it, and it's clever the way they've done it. Okay, so the problem is you find out with something like a Kepler that just does a photometry, which is how bright the star is, you find out something's going across and how big it is, and you can deduce all this stuff. Great, but you can't see it. Well, the problem with seeing it is that the contrast ratio from the planet to the brightness of the star can be like 1,000,000 to 1 or something. So what are you going to do? That's just the difference. The contrast is too bright. So, I mean, like, even if you could detect that, you don't have an actual physical detector that can do it. So what are you going to do? There's no way to sort the photons out, and it all comes together. Okay, well, instead of using a regular lens, they're going to use a lens with little ridges that, make like the camera spikes that you would get on something. Well, not really a lens flare, but more like the spikes you get from a telescope, because there's bars holding up the reflecting mirror, so you get the little plus shape. They're going to do that kind of thing on purpose, but not with, not that way, but with a lens that has these ridges so that it automatically makes a star shape. Well, when you do that, those little star spikes, their contrast, if it's 1,000,000 to 1 overall, they become 3 or 5 or 10. You can concentrate the light in there. And then the areas that are in between those spikes then become really sensitive, and you can see a little planet optically. You get pixels from a little planet that's only a millionth as bright as the bright sun, because the light is coming from there. If you can spatially resolve it, then you're fine. You just need to sort out a lot of that bright light into those spikes. Now in the spikes you can't see anything at all. It's even worse. Well, who cares, because you take more than one picture. So you take picture moving the spikes around. That allows you to add it together so that you remove the spikes altogether and get this 1,000,000 to 1 contrast of what's around that star. Then that means you get light from that star. You can put it through a prism, see what the rainbow looks like, and that tells you what chemicals are there. And frankly, there's not a lot of things that make oxygen, and things that do make oxygen, the oxygen doesn't last but 1,000 or 2 years. If you see planets or more than one with oxygen, you're starting to have evidence of life that, you know, I would convince me that we'd found life. And the naysayers, you know, eventually you can even sort them out. They've worked out sort of a lot of things that'll tell us about what the spectroscopy of a living planet is. You know, when as the planet goes in and out of the sunlight, you know, as you see the dark side, what is the spectrum of the edge, the way that the time function of that as it reflects off of forests and stuff. So if you have a green enough planet, they have that stuff figured out, besides the fact that just the presence of a lot of oxygen is pretty damn indicative. So I think that this, in our lifetime, we have a good, lifetime, in the next 20 or 30 years in my lifetime, I think we have a good chance to maybe confirm, at least for the early adopters, that there's some other life in the galaxy, which how could there not be? But, you know, it'd be nice to see. So yeah, I haven't been following that either. I did watch when they landed and got the great pictures of the comet, but I haven't followed up to see, because, and I do intend to, because that's another big one where they're always talking about how these comets are, you know, the ratio of elements are more or less what they think the ratio of elements in the early solar system is, when everything was cold before it really started to heat up. So it's supposed to tell us, but it's still just one comet. But yeah, so I don't know. I would think they'd expect to find methane ices, methane and water ices, and but no, I didn't see that they had said that. You know, weird thing I was thinking about recently and was pointed out, again, I think it was by that guy that covered the fungus, was that, you know, the planet's only as a rock, is only really like 4.5 billion years old, give or take, whatever. And life has been here, you know, about 4 billion years or something. So like from a 500 million to 1 billion years is all it took for life to arise. It doesn't make it seem that unlikely. That long ago on this planet didn't seem very hospitable. So if life's arising then, it seems like, you know what, this is something that arises. Now maybe it arises, you know, this autogenic, autobiogenesis way, or maybe no, but maybe it's already generated and it's out in space, so it lands and infects a planet. Either way, seems like it happens pretty quick. I guess if we were infected by another planet, you could go, oh, well, you know, it already developed on the other planet. But no, because we're talking about, you know, the age of the Earth is similar to the age of the other planets, so it's not like life could have developed there. And if life was really that prolific that it would infect us, or that easy to create that it would be generated, then it wouldn't be another planet in the solar system that would have time to create that situation. So, hey, well, I'm going to go because I think this is about an hour, and no further talk by me is necessary. But thanks. I feel really lucky that somebody shows up. Somebody's checking out YouTube at that time and willing to come in, and that it was somebody willing to chat. I really appreciate it. Now, you might be away from your desk because you said you'll be back in a second, so I don't know if you heard this, but maybe you'll watch the video and you'll see me thank your presence. Oh, I'll just chat you. Yeah. I'm going to... Thanks for showing up. Oh, you said okay. All right. All right, dude. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Comment. Keep in touch on the threads, dude. All right. Bye. Yeah, I'll do it earlier. And well, what I actually, if you really want to like help motivate me or make me think it should be done, I'll tell you. I want to set it up so I do one regularly, like every week or at a particular time, or even every month, once a month, but probably every week or 2 weeks. It's just hard to choose a time that I want to commit to doing that always on that time. I'm sort of like the flexibility of not knowing what day something, and kind of. So yeah, at the very least, it'd be nice if I could decide a couple hours in advance, but that doesn't seem very likely either, the way I run my time. But I'd like to do this regularly. I think it's a good thing, and I think while we're waiting for proper tools, that having these kinds of hosted rooms, we could bring in other people. So, cheers.